We ever going to get some justice, some accountability against this movement? We ever going to see that happen? There was a step today that I thought was at least in the right direction. Rand Paul has called to subpoena Antifa plane records, hotel records, travel records, and all funding. Friends, there are groups that are being funded. There are individuals and groups that are being funded to do this kind of agitation, which is a criminal conspiracy. There are conspiracy statutes. You know what a conspiracy is under federal law? Two or more people who try to put in motion a plan to break federal law. It's not hard to be guilty of conspiracy. That's why the feds, when they want to jam somebody up, love to use that charge so much. So this is a good first step. It'll be even better when they announce an Antifa RICO prosecution. It is, after all, Antifa is an interstate criminal conspiracy organized and funded as an entity. So I say line them up and knock them down. Let's do it. Let's use the law as it should be to prevent criminality, not to lock up incoming national security advisors because Democrats are so sad they lost. Hillary lost. I'm going to tell you this right now, and it's not going to change. If Trump wins re-election, I'm going to be a sore winner. If we lose, I'll be a respectful and reasonable person. But I will tell you, if Trump wins, I'll be a sore winner because the Democrats deserve to have their faces absolutely rubbed in all of this. It's disgusting what they're doing. It's horrific. It's appalling. And I'm not going to be able to just let that go. Not after all the lies told during the lockdowns and all the double standards. And now this pretense that the violence is because of Trump. I mean, come on. What are they going to say next? That Trump isn't strong enough on the border, that they're really strong on border security. They're the ones that want to build a wall. How much crazier can it really get from what we're already seeing here? I do want the president, though, to go after Antifa and these other groups. I want the Department of Justice to use the tools at its disposal because we should know. One, we should stop this. People don't deserve to have their cities destroyed by across state lines criminal conspiracy using the wires, meaning anything that's telecommunications crossing state boundaries, which is what they're all doing. They're coordinating this across state lines, and they're going to attack law enforcement officers, burn down buildings. That's not protected First Amendment speech. In some cases, they're going to kill people, which is what they've already done. So why don't we start locking them up? Let's go. And let's also bring them up on federal charges and say, okay, we'll cut you a deal. Who was paying to send you to Kenosha? Who was paying to send you to Portland? What were you really planning to do? Who were you in communication with during your riots in, I don't know, L.A. just had its first series in the last couple of days of new anti-cop riots. And from what I understand, this is where a police officer shot somebody who had a gun and was a threat to police officers. So now we're going to see riots no matter what happens. Right? If you shoot someone who is black in America and you're a cop, there can be an expectation of riots. Your life will be threatened and it'll all fall apart because the BLM movement is full of lies and has filled people's heads with the nonsense that law enforcement is routinely and systematically murdering black men who are unarmed out of racism. That's the actual storyline, and it's a falsehood. It's a falsehood. We need to be able to say that now, too. One of the big problems I think we've had in all of this is you have so few people who are willing to, in the earlier days, speak out against this movement. And it was troubling to see how even major corporations, I'm going to tell you, I tried to write a piece on wartime conservatism, and it was a very good piece, and everyone liked it. And some very large media organizations out there were not up to printing it. A bunch of different websites were, oh, no, we can't print that. Why? There are political campaigns, a word borrowed from wars. You can't talk about being a wartime conservative. Nope, can't say that. That was right, in the weeks after the George Floyd incident, when I was trying to tell everybody, be prepared for what we're going to be up against. The left can't help itself. This isn't a smart tactic. What they've done here with this mobilization. They liked it for a while, and it did put Trump on defense. But now it's become too apparent what it really is. Now that we see the truth, it is a liability, and they wish they could make the whole thing go away. Of course, they can't. As I've said, I don't believe they really even have full control over the movement anymore. I think if Pelosi called for this to stop, a lot of people would say no. Look at what they do to Ted Wheeler. Ted Wheeler is basically walking around offering Antifa a, shiatsu massage. Please, Antifa, I'll do anything, just like me. And they actually scream curses in his face and spit at him. And he's a lib coward who does everything he can to make them happy. And they hate him. You think they're going to listen to other Democrats now who realize at least what this is going to do to their electoral chances? They don't care. It doesn't matter. No, what they really want you to believe, they want you to believe, they want you to believe that Trump is the one who's not denouncing the violence now. The violence is a result of Trump. Play 19.
We need to hear our leaders denouncing the violence in our streets, denouncing it. We need to hear them tell us the truth that rioting divides instead of unites. But this president can't say that. He cannot denounce the violence. He just cannot. He cannot admit that it divides instead of unites. Can't do that. Here's why. Because Election Day is just 63 days away. He's desperate, and he desperately needs to change the subject. He can't run on his record, really. Think about it. Think about the truth.
Trump can't. I know it's Don Lemon, so I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here of trying to understand the workings of Don Lemon's brain. He's not a very smart man. Trump can't denounce the rioting because he can't run on his record? That doesn't even make sense. Trump has been denouncing the rioting and the looting all along. Now we're going to, again, nothing matters. No reality matters, no history, no truth. We are in a culturally relative, moral relativism universe with the left where they'll just make it up as they go along. You look at them and say, how could you honestly say this at this point? How can you really be making such a stupid claim? And it's because they think people are dumb enough that they'll believe it. I don't know. Oh, and they were very upset at the president because he's not going against Rittenhouse, right? Because he's not throwing Rittenhouse under the bus. First of all, presidents should not be commenting on individual criminal cases, really. I mean, when I say not commenting, they can speak about it, but they should not be influencing people. The president is an executive branch employee. There should be a presumption of innocence, but also the process of the government's prosecution should be allowed to go forward without undue interference from other officials, which Obama didn't do, by the way. You go back to the Obama administration. Remember, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon. Remember he said that? He was trying to create greater sympathy for Trayvon Martin. Remember when that was the big story of racism in America? When some Hispanic guy gets into a fight with a black guy, and the black guy tries to bash in the Hispanic guy's head in the sidewalk, and it was an and the guy's not a cop, right? Zimmerman's not a cop, but they created out of nothing this. Oh, he's a white Hispanic. That's what they were saying. He's a white Hispanic because his last name. He's half white. He appeared visually. George Zimmerman, one would have thought, was of Hispanic origin. But they negated his Hispanic origin. Can you imagine if you were if someone in the press tried to negate, say at this point, a portion of Kamala Harris's heritage? There would be an outcry. There'd be outrage. But George Zimmerman, no, George Zimmerman was white. That was the claim. The white Hispanic, whatever that even means. But they needed something. They wanted a story to tell. And the media in that case even went so far as to doctor tapes to make Zimmerman look even more guilty, which, if memory serves, he didn't go to prison at all. It turns out that you can't expect people to get their heads bashed into the sidewalk when they have a loaded gun on them. They're going to use the gun. That is self-defense. And that's a natural law issue. That's not even just a question of statute. It doesn't matter what any government claims or says about your ability to defend yourself. You have a moral right to defend yourself. This is really one of the most basic rights that you could have. So, Zimmerman, who's a weird guy, obviously, and I'm not like a George Zimmerman fan at all, but, Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin. They're in a fight. Now we've got the incident with Rittenhouse. I saw the lawyer last night on Tucker's show. I'm just going to say, I don't think this lawyer, if you're a lawyer and you're showing up for a major criminal case like this, you got to sound like you're really squared away. I was not impressed with this guy. Don't get mad at me. I'm just telling you the truth. I do not think that Rittenhouse is being well served by this particular attorney. I wish we could get this guy. I wish he had a better legal counsel. I don't think you show up on Tucker Carlson's show as a lawyer with like a rumpled dress shirt that looks like you just rolled out of buying a jug of Nutella at Costco or something. Like I did not get a good vibe. I'm just telling you, I didn't get a good vibe about the whole thing. And he's going to claim this is a well-regulated militia defense under the Second Amendment. Buddy, you're trying to get your client off of a murder charge. You got to work within the system you have. You can't. This is not an Aaron Sorkin movie. I do think that there's a very strong claim for Rittenhouse on self-defense. I've said that all along. I also think that we shouldn't be encouraging people who are 17 or 18, even if they think they're helping. They're putting yourself in a very dangerous situation when it comes to use of force. And again, this is not a moral issue. This is a wisdom issue, right? You defend yourself no matter what, right? If someone's attacking you, I don't care what you've done or what the situation is. If they're the ones attacking you, you have a right to defend yourself. So that's a different question than, say, should you put yourself in the middle of an angry mob, choose to be in the middle of an angry mob with a loaded weapon when you have very limited training and very limited understanding of the law and also what a lethal force situation is going to be like. This guy was not, former SF. You know who was former SF? The guy in Austin who shot one of these BLM lunatics who was waving a gun in his face and threatening him. No charges there. But that guy understood. This guy's waving a gun in my face. This meets all the parameters, and I'm going to defend myself. And, he's somebody who was trained. And I'm not saying you have to be trained, of course, to defend yourself, but I'm just saying, and he was put in that situation. He didn't go looking for the situation. I just wish that young Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't facing the ruination of his life, which he now is. He seems like he's probably a very good guy. Based on the reporting about what his intentions were. He was supportive even of I think he's young and ignorant enough to think the protesters have a point. They don't, but he was a well-intentioned kid. He was trying. I don't know, maybe you shouldn't call someone who's 17 a kid, but we always go back. People change this all the time. Are you a kid when you're 17? Well, you can join the Marine Corps when you're 17, so certainly not going to tell a 17-year-old Marine he's a kid. All right, but back to what Trump said about the Rittenhouse situation, because he was asked about it, and here's what. Well, first, you know what? Hold on. I'm gonna get into this in a bit more detail. So hold one second. What does the COVID-19 pandemic have to do with you losing your home? Well, you see, the FBI has been telling people that cybercrime is up about 75% since COVID hit, and home title theft is a cybercrime. They find your home's title online, then they use a quitclaim deed to get you off the title. They add themselves, they take out loans against your home and stick you with the payments. You may not even find out about home title theft against you until you get the eviction notice. Take action today. Protect yourself. Create a virtual barrier around your home's title. Just go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. You can also check to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it yet. Again, it's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK. President had a press conference where he was pushed on the Rittenhouse case. Here's how they try to set up. Remember, one person defends himself and kills two people who are coming after him. We see it on video. We're not just taking someone's word for it. It's on the video. They were going after him. There's no question about that. One guy defends himself, and that's supposed to be symbolic or that's supposed to be clear evidence that the whole of Trump supporters are violent and they're the problem. Meanwhile, you got, whole blocks of cities burned down, people throwing rocks at cops, trying to blind them with lasers, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of them for months and months and months, all Democrats. Not indicative of anything, they tell you. Not indicative of anything. This is outrageous. But this is, in fact, what is happening. All right, so here they are trying to push Trump to condemn conservative protesters now. Oh, this is the game they want to play. 16.
So do you want to also take this chance to condemn what your supporters did?
Well, I understand they had large numbers of people that were supporters, but that was a peaceful protest. And paint is a defensive mechanism. Paint is not bullets. Your supporters, and they are your supporters indeed, shot a young gentleman who and killed him, not with paint, but with a bullet. And I think it's disgraceful. These people, they protested peacefully. They went in very peacefully. And I'll tell you what they're protesting. They're protesting when they turn on television or read whatever they may be reading, and they see a city like Chicago where 78 people were shot and 13 died, or a city like New York where the crime rate has gone through the roof, or a city like Portland where the entire city is ablaze all the time, and a mayor says, we don't want any help from the federal government. When these people turn that on and they see that, they say, this is not our country. This is not our country. That was a peaceful protest, totally.
I like how the president just goes right back at them with the nonsense they're trying now. Oh, yeah, sure. The problem here, folks, are the Trump supporters. Really? No one who's honest and intelligent can believe that. Come on. This is the Democrat movement. It couldn't be any more clear. It's obvious. They've been actually in your faces. Who's going out toppling monuments? Who wants to destroy Christopher Columbus statues, Gandhi statues? Who wants to scream in people's faces while they're in outdoor dining, because God forbid we're allowed to eat indoors ever again, about, how they stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter? We all know it's all Democrats. But they want to focus on the Trump supporters. Here's the president when asked specifically about Kyle Rittenhouse, 17.
Saying, are you going to condemn the actions of vigilantes like Kyle Rittenhouse?
Well, we're looking at all of it. That was an interesting situation. You saw the same tape as I saw, and he was trying to get away from them, I guess, it looks like, and he fell, and then they very violently attacked him, and it was something that we're looking at right now, and it's under investigation, but I guess he was in very big trouble. He would have been. He probably would have been killed. But it's under investigation.
I think it's under investigation, but from what he saw in the video, he's telling you, it kind of looked like the guy was defending himself, which it certainly does. But I think everyone needs to remember that as far as the Democrats are concerned, it doesn't matter if someone's attacking you. If you're a Trump supporter, you deserve to be attacked. That's what they believe. You're a Trump supporter, you deserve to be attacked. You deserve what you get. And we're not going to allow you to even defend never mind have the state defend you and protect you. No. That's not how the left plays the game. Folks, they're dishonest, but they do play for keeps. So how are we looking for re-election, and how is it looking in our fight against the insane libs for the future of this country? Got somebody who can weigh in on that and more joining us right now to also talk about his latest book. Donald Trump Jr. is with us now. His book is Liberal Privilege, Joe Biden and the Democrats' Defense of the Indefensible, topic near and dear to our heart on this show. Don, thanks so much for calling in.
Good to be with you, Buck. It's great to be here.
All right. So, look, you wrote a book. We actually had you on the show for that one a while back. Huge bestseller. Yeah. What are you doing with this one? What are you laying out? I mean, obviously, we got an election coming up. Every issue feels like it's so heightened. What should people know about liberal privilege?
Well, listen, I wrote the book because because of the lockdown, I was locked away up at my cabin. Kimberly's a lot of fun, but I had to do a little bit of work. I couldn't go to work. Kids couldn't go to school, couldn't go to church, couldn't do anything. I started looking at the person that we're running against. And I was amazed when I started digging deep into all of these things. Again, whether it's health, whether it's policy, whether it's sort of the family graft, whether it's racial issues. I mean, Joe Biden, according to Robert Gates, Obama's Secretary of Defense, has been on the wrong side of every major decision of his entire career. And that's 50 years. And I'm watching the media try to run him as this sort of, undefined, nondescript Democrat. He's just moderate Joe from Scranton. And I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And so since the media has sort of abdicated their job, they've just walked away from giving people both sides of a story to simply be a cheerleader for the radical left. I said someone has to actually take this down and put it down, because it's literally me versus, there's guys like you as well, but like our universe of people on the right willing to say these things to get them out there is, 1% of the media masses that are literally doing whatever they can to cover up the disastrous Joe Biden career. I mean, they're running this thing like, hey, Joe Biden, he's going to come and save America. I go, he's been there for half a century. Like, I can't name a single accomplishment. Name something that he's done other than building up China. It's been a disaster. So I literally said, since the media refuses to do their job, they won't do it. I have to put out the counterpoint for those people. It's not even for the MAGA crowd. It's for the people who are on the fence, people who want to know what's really going on, who realize they're not being told any part of the story. I mean, it's hard to hide a half a century of failure, but the media is doing their darndest to make sure they do that for Joe.
Talking to Donald Trump Jr. He's got a new book out, Liberal Privilege, Joe Biden and the Democrats' Defense of the Indefensible. Don, what do you make of the switch that has happened just this week, where we've gone from what riots, these are mostly peaceful protests, to the president and your dad is somehow responsible for the riots? How did this happen, and what do you say in response to it?
Well, it happened because they saw the polling data, and all of a sudden, they ignored the riots, the looting, the vandalism. They ignored it for an entire week. That week, that was the hate-filled anti-America Zoom call, also known as the DNC. They ignored it. Not one person, Buck, spoke about it. Not one person mentioned it. Joe Biden didn't even come out against it and say anything. There was tacit acceptance from the left. Remember, if you opened up your business to feed your family, you'd get arrested or lose your license. But if you looted that business, that's okay. NPR is writing articles, the case for looting, meaning it's okay. You can loot a little bit. It's not a big deal. I mean, this is the Democrat platform. So it took Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon to sit there on TV and say, hey, man, guys, it's really hurting us in the polls. The next day, all of a sudden, there's a switch. So they went from peaceful protest to riots that are now Trump's fault. I was like, I don't know how they could be riots if they've been peaceful protests for the last 6 months, according to the media, according to every Democrat, according to these outlets. Those buildings that you see burning in the background as they're selling you this BS, obviously, it's just a sheer coincidence. You saw Chris Cizillo, whatever the hell his name is, the other day. Well, they're mostly peaceful, and there hasn't really been any kind of escalation. And the picture that he posted is a picture of a city in flame. It's ludicrous, but they've been selling that to the American people. And that was a big part of the book also, highlighting the hypocrisy, the double standard by which the media will look at Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Again, whether that be on policy, notice they spent more time talking about my 3-year-old nephew and if he in fact built a Lego White House for his grandfather, because my sister mentioned that in his speech, than they did talking about getting a peace deal done in the Middle East. I mean, sort of the holy grail of geopolitical politics. A Middle East peace deal was accomplished 2 weeks ago. And goose eggs, crickets. Nothing. It's like it didn't happen. So the book was really there to make sure that people understand the uneven playing field that we're on, the bias that they're getting their news from. That guy that's working hard or lady working hard to put food on the table, they're coming home and they're consuming 5 minutes of news a day, and it's just 96% negative against Donald Trump, irrespective of economic numbers, irrespective of results, regardless of Middle East peace deals, all of the wins that we've seen, trade deals with China, renegotiating failed NAFTA. it's like they never happened. You know, if Obama did these things, he'd be emperor for life. But he got nothing done, and Biden was his VP. All those things that Biden says he's going to solve, he had 8 years as vice president and 40 years in the Senate to actually fix. But now he's going to be our savior, Buck. Now he's going to do it. He's a slow starter. It took him half a century to get into his groove. Is anyone that stupid?
Unfortunately, because we see
maybe they
with
are.
With Joe Biden,
but I hope they see through it. Yeah.
I mean, the most recent, I'm sure you saw that most recent soundbite where he's kind of talking about 100 years of this and the thing and the place. And there's a part of me, I mean, this is politics, as people say, it ain't beanbag, right? Like, this is real. So you can't let this stuff slide. But it's a combination of funny and sad, depending on how you really come at it. What you see with this guy?
It would be funny. It would be funny if it was in a movie. I mean, I watch the Biden campaign. It's like a scene out of Veep every day. Every day this happens. It'd be funny if it wasn't so scary. And I don't mean to make light of dementia, but Joe Biden, and I go into this in great detail in the book. I actually interview Ronnie Jackson, who was the White House doctor and observed him for 8 years there, has seen the steady decline. And then you say, wait a minute, this is a guy that has had 2 brain surgeries because of aneurysms, because of explosions in his brain. He's lucky to be alive, but no doctor with any credibility would tell you that there's not a huge chance that even if you had one, that there'd be a major issue cognitively with you forever from that point forward. He's had 2. And then he can't remember where he is most of the time. You saw the speech yesterday. I mean, he's on a teleprompter. And I mean, you could see the look of fear in his eyes the second he realized he forgot where he was, the point he was going to make. You saw the same thing, Buck, in the debates. Remember the Democrat debates? That was 3 weeks ago. That was before they became obsolete. Now the New York Times is telling us and the Washington Post is telling us the debates are obsolete because they know they don't want Joe Biden on the stage with Donald Trump. I mean, in all fairness.
Can I ask you, do you think, just for everyone listening, we're talking to Donald Trump Jr., got a new book out. You got to check it out, Liberal Privilege. But Don, I want to ask, do you think the debate's going to happen? I know they've set it on the calendar, but do you believe it's going to happen?
I don't know how he gets out of it now. I mean, they're trying. You saw, the New York Times, again, Washington Post, the debates are sort of obsolete now. They're obsolete. But remember, during the debates, Joe Biden would sit there. He'd give a 45-second answer, not actually answer the question. Then he'd forget where he was going. And it was like, just like a deer in the headlights, panic. And then he would immediately, his default answer is, well, I don't want to take up any more time, so I'm going to let it. And I was like, Joe, I'd actually appreciate you finishing your thought rather than pretending you answered a question. But again, no one called him out on it. No one. And if Donald Trump had a performance like that, if Donald Trump once stammered and forgot where he was and couldn't read the basics of a teleprompter like Joe Biden did yesterday, every television psychologist in America would be on the air saying he's in the later stages of dementia and Alzheimer's plus other mental diseases combined. Joe Biden, I mean, we're going to give this guy the nuclear
I've also got
football?
to ask you, Don, I got to ask you because you understand what this media, the mainstream media, obviously there are exceptions like me, all the people on the right who make the contrarian case to the sort of left-wing corporatist socialism that is constantly being spewed at CNN and MSNBC and other places. But you are the particular recipient of media attention as a member of the First Family, as the president's eldest son. There's another would-be first son, in a sense here, in Hunter Biden. I mean, just on a personal level, do you ever view the way the media shows no interest in the child with the stripper driving around in like the new Porsche, even though he claims he's got no money and he's on the board of Burisma?
How much time you got? Let's just say there's probably 2 chapters in the book on this, but Hunter Biden is taking $1.5 billion from the Chinese government. For your listeners who don't know what that means, in a typical fund structure, there's a 2% management fee and 20% of the profits. 2% annual fee on $1.5 billion is $30 million a year to Hunter Biden. You think Joe Biden's going to be tough on China? I mean, he spent his entire career shipping our jobs to China. Again, NAFTA, TPP, pushing for permanent status in the World Trade Organization. Joe Biden has done more damage to the middle class and the manufacturing sector of this country than any human being alive. He should be running for president of China, not of America. But again, no one's going to hold him accountable for that. You think it would be a news story if I knocked up a stripper, Buck, and I spent 3 years hiding from child support? You know,
Yes.
she'd be the #1 interview in America. And they're like, this person doesn't exist. That never happened. Joe is a great family guy. I get to listen to Hunter Biden in that like sort of, pre-recorded like vignette set that he did talking about, his family's character. I'm like, this guy's going to go there? I mean, the media's attack on my speech at the DNC was that I guess the lighting made my eyes shine. So they said I was on cocaine. I go, no. You have me confused with the actual crackhead, Hunter Biden. It's absolutely disgusting. And I've done it because they've said, hey, our family has done graft and all of this stuff. I go, how about this? You put me on a debate stage. Jim Vandehei of Axios did this. So, no one that anyone's going to confuse as a conservative. I said, Jim, you moderate the debate. Me versus Hunter, full disclosure. Tax returns, everything. Full disclosure, you do it. Media, Hunter Biden would kill Donald Jr. He's a Yale lawyer. I'm sure he didn't get into Yale because his dad was pulling the purse strings with the education. I'm sure it had nothing to do with it, right? Just like all of his other jobs. But I said, let's do it. They said, Hunter would kill Don Jr. I go, fine, then make it happen. Put the nail in my coffin. Let's end this once and for all. All of a sudden, it went to crickets. That doesn't even talk about Ukraine, the other graphs. More importantly, what the book gets into that no one knows about is, Joe's brother, Jim, getting all these housing contracts to build homes in the Middle East in these war zones. Billion-dollar type contracts, minor details. He'd never built a home in his life. But you know what he did have? He had access to Joe Biden. That's all it is. If these were things that my family were doing, we'd be in jail right now. We were actually international business people before we got into politics, and we stopped doing new deals abroad to avoid the notion of impropriety. We actually did it. Hunter and Jim magically became business people overnight when their dad and brother respectively became VP. But again, you can't touch that. So I go into all of those details. So anyone who thinks that this is moderate Joe from Scranton and not the biggest swamp creature DC has ever produced is just flagrantly mistaken. So this book is the counterpoint to all of the fluffing that the media is giving Biden, his record, his history, his family, because it's all smoke and mirrors. It's all a lie, but no one's going to know that unless you take the effort and put it out there. So that's what this is. I mean, you have literally 560 citations of each of these points also, so they can't say I'm spreading fake news. I mean, it's 35 pages of literally citations of all of these points, all of it. The voting record, the racial record. It's a disaster. Any one of these things by themselves would be disqualifying if a conservative did it. But Joe Biden's the perfect vessel for the left because they can tell middle America that he's a moderate, but not talk about Kamala and her record as VP, because we all know she's going to be in charge anyway, right? Not talk about the Biden-Sanders, Bernie Sanders joint unity platform. Joe Biden's platform is not a moderate platform if you're utilizing Bernie Sanders' platform. I mean,
I think folks are going to have to get the rest of it in the book, which sounds like it's well worth the read, everyone. You should check it out. Liberal Privilege. Donald Trump Jr. is the author. Liberal Privilege, Joe Biden and the Democrats' Defense of the Indefensible. Don, thanks so much for coming on. I know you don't need to hear this from me, but please, let's make sure your dad wins, okay? Please.
Hey, man, I'm working hard. Make sure all your listeners are doing the same, okay?
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Have a good one.
There are some governors out there who are actually looking at the data and the science about COVID-19 and taking the right conclusions from it. You won't hear much about this because we're all supposed to accept lockdown until the election, which I've been telling you, Democrats were going to do this for months, and turns out that is what they're going to do. Keep us locked down in blue states and blue cities as much as they can get away with until the election actually happens. And then we'll see where we are after that. They might lock us down even more if Trump wins, right, to punish us for our political sins. But here's Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is, by the numbers, 3 times better than Governor Cuomo at keeping people alive during a pandemic. 3 times better. Really more than that, almost 3.5 times better. Right, so you got about 10,000 deaths in Florida, about 33,000 deaths in New York from COVID, okay? So anyone who thinks that Governor DeSantis needs a lecture has to explain why they can't do math. But DeSantis also is letting everyone know there's not going to be a second lockdown. Play 22.
We gained jobs, 74,000, I think, private sector jobs in July. And just imagine if we had shut down the state, we'd have lost another 300,000 or 400,000 jobs. And so I think that we understand what we need to do, but we will never do any of these lockdowns again. And I hear people say they'll shut down the country, and honestly, I cringe because we know places that have done that. The most draconian lockdown in the world has been Peru, military enforced since March. They have the highest per capita mortality in the world from COVID. And at best, what a lockdown will do is delay. It does not reduce the ultimate mortality, but I think Dr. Alice would agree it creates a lot of other problems with mortality that a lot of people don't necessarily focus on.
All it does is delay, but when the population is so fearful, you can control them. Promise that, if we just do this one more month, you'll be safe. The government can't follow through on that promise. Everyone needs to understand that. The government's not in a position to deliver on the promise it makes here. But people don't care. They want to blame Trump for all this, in this country at least, even though it's hit the whole world. The whole world has been hit by this. A lot of very advanced, sophisticated countries have had a terrible time with COVID. Some other countries have had a much less terrible time with COVID. Obesity is an enormous indicator of how well a society is going to do with this. I'll just note that. So that doesn't get talked about very much in all this. Not all populations of countries are the same. And we are not taking the right conclusions from this if we think that continued lockdown makes any sense. DeSantis is right. The critics, the haters of DeSantis, they don't know what they're talking about.